Good afternoon. Let me welcome you on behalf of Georgian Institute of Politics for this very interesting event today. As you know, we have today the discussion of the recent study, which was published by CEPS, which is, I'm sure you all know, one of the leading European think tank in Brussels. The name of the report is Building New Momentum for European Integration of the Balkan and Eastern European Associate States. Basically, this study compares two regions in terms of EU integration, and it's a very timely publication. And as far as I know, CEPS already had a discussion of this study in Moldova and in Ukraine, and so this is now third associated countries where we actually GIP was asked to facilitate this discussion. So we would like to thank CEPS for this interesting offer and for very interesting actually publication, which is very important, especially the conclusions regarding Georgia and some EAP countries, which is based on solid research. One of the interesting things is that, which I actually noticed also, that, you know, the terminology CEPS using, I'm actually ready to subscribe all these events, and probably Stefan knows that, you know, there's some discussions in European capitals, and sometimes we have difficulties how to define the region. Sometimes, you know, this country is called Eastern Partnership and South Caucasus, so Georgia falls somewhere, you know, like it seems like it's not Eastern Europe and it's South Caucasus somewhere, and then we have, you know, former Soviet Union and some other names. And I think here in this study we have quite clear, you know, like answer to this. More importantly, this is very important because, as you know, there's a kind of unclear situation in from the European Union what to do with this region, actually, with Eastern Partnership, and with this ongoing pandemic. It's even became more difficult to define, you know, the kind of new policy towards the region. And at the same time, more important for us probably is the view from Brussels regarding the three associated countries, Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova. And as you know, last year, this group actually was officially inaugurated. So I think this will be very important to see how these three countries actually can work together. And there's a very good models, you know, from recent history, from Baltic states, I don't know, Visegrad 4 and some other models, which probably this associated trio should follow. But I think we should see how this will evolve. At the same time, of course, these three countries also have you know, a lot of tasks related to associated agreement and some other topics which is discussed in this study. So I hope with this small introduction, you know, I raise some sort of interest with this kind of introductory remark. And I hope we will have a very interesting, lively discussion, as we have very prominent, you know, panelists in our panel, and as well as moderators. So I hope we will enjoy today's discussion. And last, what I would like to give a floor to Mr. Andrius Kobilius, who is very well known in EAP countries in Georgia as well. As you already know, he's a member of European Parliament and the chair of the delegation to the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly. He was one of the actually initiator of this study. He's a great champion for EAP countries. You know, he's a well-known great champion for EAP countries, and I hope we will have some other opportunities also to work with him in this capacity. Thank you very much, and Mr. Kobilius, floor is yours.
Well, thanks a lot, Cornelis. Thanks a lot to everybody, and really pleasure and privilege to tell a few words. All my introductory, you know, remarks will be connected towards what an important role Georgia can play in this, you know, respect on new momentum, you know, of integration. The first question, of course, is why do we need this new moment of integration, as the study is called? And I would say two things. First of all, really, integration is important not only for Georgia, Ukraine, or Moldova, it's important very much also for the whole European Union, integration of the region. Because this is the only way how success of those countries can be great. I'm always repeating very simple, conclusion. I don't know in the history of European continent any country which came out from, totalitarian regime and was able on its own to create its own success. There are no such examples. Our integration towards, EU is really giving such a possibility. Second, if we are looking, the progress of this integration during the last 10 or even more years, especially when Eastern Partnership policy was created. Unfortunately, I see that, if at the very beginning it was very dynamic and a lot of things were achieved, for the recent period of time, I see some kind of, not stagnation of the processes, but some kind of, too slow movement forward. Eastern Partnership countries are demanding, much more clear perspective of membership and integration, and EU always is, answering the same, language, make reforms, and then we shall see, but is not able to give a clear way forward. What will happen during the next decade? And so that's really, I would say that the study of CEPS is giving very clear answer. What can be done? Not only what can be done by associated countries, by Eastern Partnership countries. In European Parliament, we love very much, to teach, to explain what kind of reforms Eastern Partnership countries needs to do. Of course, there are a lot of things which need to be done, fight against corruption, modernization, and rule of law, and mature democracy. We can name, but we are not so good in trying to look what is needed to be done on our side, on the EU side, in order to keep your motivation for reforms, much more clear perspective of what you can achieve. And that's why really the study is so important, because it gives also some kind of ideas, some kind of proposals, how this new momentum can be created from both sides, from Eastern Partnership countries, but also from EU, providing much more clear goals and targets which can be achieved. Now, what is positive during recent period of time in that area, in that field? Of course, first of all, it's very good that Georgia resolved its political crisis, and it's back on track, I would say. I hope that this can really be the future of Georgia. Second, of course, it's very good and very important that so-called association trio was established, and that is some kind of new momentum for time being. You can feel this, force and demand from trio countries, which are demanding something more ambitious and bigger, perspectives from EU institutions. Second, it's really very important what Georgia did. At least in its statements, when Georgian government announced that, in 2024, it is ready to put official request for membership in EU. I cannot predict what will be the answer, from Commission, from other EU institutions. But I see that this ambition really brings some kind of new momentum for both sides. I hope that this statement will demand from first of all from Georgia government, from political community, really to concentrate itself on this ambition, to prove that Georgia really is ready to be considered by EU institutions as a serious candidate. Second, of course, EU institutions, are really, they need to prepare themselves for such kind of request and to give really some kind of rational answer to such a request. Now, of course, what study is saying, we need to be in some way realistic about what can be an answer from EU when Georgia will put such a request. Definitely, EU is struggling with its own internal issues, internal challenges. One of them is definitely decision-making procedures, decision-making processes, and attempts to reform them. So European Conference on Future of Europe, just started. I don't know if it will give any kind of clear answer how those decision-making processes should be reformed. But of course, we need to have in mind that some countries are very clear in their position. I mean, France or some other countries, when they are saying that without reforms in decision-making, they are not ready to allow any new country to become a real member of EU. So that what makes some ideas suggested by study by Michael Emerson and his team, really of very interesting and important to discuss. Since of course we can say that from one side the study shows that Eastern Partnership countries, trio of Eastern Partnership countries, are very equal to Western Balkan countries in their integration progress. But from another side, and of course Western Balkan countries have membership perspective and Eastern Partnership countries still do not have. But that does not mean really that demanding the same policy with membership perspective for Eastern Partnership countries will deliver any kind of new momentum to integration. So that's why what Michael Emerson and his team are proposing, to come back a little bit and to look into what we call Romano Prodi formula, everything but institutions, with Michael Emerson modification of that formula, everything but progressive approach to, or conditional approach to institutions. That makes, at least from my point of view, interesting combination, which can be, from one side, attractive to trio of association countries, because that is what makes breakthrough from this, stagnating formula that Eastern Partnership countries are demanding membership and EU institutions are not giving, any kind of clear answer. From another side, for EU institutions or for EU member states, it also can be attractive because that is, how this issue of decision making can be, at least partially resolved with this approach. So I will conclude, yes, really I think that this is very important moment, very interesting study, which demands really deep discussions both in Eastern Partnership countries, but also inside of EU institutions, in order really to show to all of us some kind of different perspective for the next decade, to have much more clear vision what we are able to achieve during the next decade. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kubilius, for interesting remarks and the introduction. It's always a pleasure to have you here. And now I would like to hand over to Stefan Meister, who you know quite well. He's the head of the Untitled Stiftung in Tbilisi. So, as I said, he will moderate today's discussion. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Corneli, and thank you to GIP and CEPS for setting up this important event. I'm very happy to share also the discussion and the presentation. Just technically, or just an information for all who attend, you can during the whole presentations raise your hand and also write messages in the Q&A. That we can then pick up afterwards directly questions. I will remind you again, but it would be, yeah, we were just waiting also for the discussion. So just to mention that we have 2 rounds, 1 round with outreach questions and the second round also with people who can just come in and ask direct questions. Just a couple of words. I'm really very short in introductory remarks. So as I understand, this is already the second report, and this is based also on this report is based on a first report. So it's not new, but I think the concept is really very, very good. And I have to say, what I really like on CEPS are 2 things. The first thing is they still and really do fundamental research. So their research is based on fundamental studies, I think, which is not always the case. And the second thing I really appreciate is that CEPS does not give up to work on to create a momentum for Eastern Partnership countries. So I think, which is also very important. It's a very important advocate also for this. And just a couple of words. As we all know, EU's neighborhood policy is based on the logic of the enlargement policy, but there is no political will for enlargement. At the same time, there's no logic why Balkan countries have the opportunity for accession and Eastern Partnership countries have not. As the report shows, average rating of Balkan and association agreement countries on political and economic criteria are roughly on the same level. In some association agreement countries are even ahead. So I think this triggers a debate about that the EU is unprepared for further enlargement. I think what we also see, and I think this is very important in this neighborhood, that other actors like Turkey, Russia, and China are becoming more active in both regions with different role and governance models, which also challenge the EU and its neighborhood policy. So the EU needs to find answers to the question how to stabilize its neighborhood and how it can provide progress in economic reforms, rule of law, and democratization, and how to adapt to this new reality. So we have 3 parts which are now coming up. First is presentation, second is then comments, and the third is a discussion where you can ask questions and also come in to ask questions. Presentation is done by Michael Emerson. I think most of you know him as his associate senior research fellow at CEPS. And a long-term, one of the best long-term experts on Eastern Partnership countries. And we have Tinatin Ahvlediani, who is researcher at CEPS. So they both will present the report. First, with roughly 20 minutes do they have. Then we have comments, 3 comments by very distinguished and good speakers from different fields. This will be Maka Botchoroshvili, who is member of parliament and chair of the Committee on European Integration, Georgia. We have Salome Shapakiadze from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia. And we have Vano Chikhviadze, who is EU Integration Program Manager at Open Society Georgia Foundation, also very knowledgeable person. So let's start with the presentation finally, Michael and Tinatin. Yeah, looking forward to hear the key findings also of recommendations also of this report. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Good to see you again. And thanks for the kind words about our work. New momentum is the key word in the title. And that's because new momentum is needed both for the trio, the association trio, as we call them now, and the Balkan states, for reasons that we'll go into. This work is a product of a project that's been ongoing for several years between CEPS and our partners in Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, a project that has received excellent support by the Swedish SIDA agency, for which we are most appreciative. Right, the timing of this event I find now extremely good for two reasons. One is that Georgia has kind of provisionally recovered from a rather distressing political period and has become somewhat respectable again. So that's very good and absolutely essential for the credibility of all this business. And secondly, the three associated states have announced that they are now the association trio, which is a formal statement whose content we're not yet, we don't quite know what's going to happen there, but we can have ideas as to what they might or should do, and I'll go into that in a moment. Why Balkans and East Europeans taken together? I mean, some people don't like this combination because it's confusing countries with membership perspectives and other countries that do not have membership perspectives. However, the realities are rather different because the actual content of the association agreement between the two groups are extremely similar. The East Europeans have in some respects moved ahead of the Balkans in terms of the content of these treaties. And the Balkan accession process is at a state of impasse. And so they are, if you like, even unhappier than you are. We see that the policy content of these two arrangements are roughly the same. Increasing common elements, European Energy Community, for example, identical for both. And the results of our work are comparable, but I defer on that to Tina, who will speak in a moment. Come back to the association trio. What should they do now, in our humble opinions? To my mind, there are really two things that could be at the top of their agenda. One is, they can't do it tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, they've got to become the gold standard. They should try to and should become the gold standard of the neighborhood policy as a whole. Our results show comparability, but if Georgia is going to persist in making a formal application in 2024 for formal membership, they've got to get top of the class. And I would hope also that all three of the trio should aim to get top of the class, not just comparable, which leads into questions of measurement, which I turn to in a moment. The second idea, I hope very much, and I see Salome Shapovidze there working away at her desk. I'm wondering what she's working on. I would hope that she and her colleagues in the other two countries are developing ideas as to how the trio together ought to propose a strengthening of the system, of the process they're engaged in. There's an Eastern Partnership Summit scheduled for October. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not, but we have heard that Charles Michel, who seems to like Georgia, has proposed a leadership meeting between the trio and the EU, which could be, if it's going to happen in a few months, an excellent opportunity for the trio to be presenting their substantive ideas. Right, well, that being so, we've got a few ideas as to the substantive ideas, and I present them under four headings, the key words. One, quantified ratings. Two, deeper sectoral integration. Three, more for more. And four, institutional participation. These are really the chapters in substance of our work. Quantified ratings, I won't go into the numbers themselves, which are abundantly presented in this report, and Tina will speak to in a moment. But it's the question of method that I'd like to pause on. In all of the work that should develop, and 3 headings I come to in a moment. There's the issue of benchmark conditionality should be the basis for legitimizing and advancing the process or not, depending upon performance. And in this report, we have innovated in quantifying ratings for all of the chapters of the DCFTA and association agreements, building on actually the Commission's own methodology for making qualitative ratings for the Balkan states. So that's quite well done, but they didn't make the extra step, the key step of quantifying them that permits aggregation and averaging and therefore more pronounced use. Okay, now the positive ideas, or the 3 substantive ideas. Deeper sectoral integration. This, in a sense, is the easiest because it's closest to accepted doctrine as it emerges as between the EU and the 3 states. You know that Ukraine already some years ago started pushing for accession to the 3 unions, energy, digital, and customs, to which one can add the internal market. And now the same kind of idea addresses the banking union, cybersecurity, the Green Deal, and last but not least, certainly, the health union issue, which is there now. So all of this can advance. There's an amber or green light for it to advance, conditional on, in each case, good conformity, compliance with the sectoral acquis, which therefore brings us back to the importance of the ratings methodology. This is even more the case, or equally the case, for my 3rd heading, more for more. This element of doctrine and discourse by the EU is vague. It's so vague as to being lacking in credibility, whereas it's meant to be an incentive. In the case of Moldova, we've seen less for less a couple of years ago. That was operational, unfortunately, but we haven't really seen more for more. And here, what could it mean? We advocate that the EU should adopt a graduated schema for progressive build-up of structural funds type assistance, starting from a situation in which Romania and Bulgaria in the new multi-annual framework, if they are at 100, the Balkans are at 30, and the trio are at 8. Now the question would be, to make this more for more business really interesting, the EU should establish what benchmark conditions have to be achieved to move up this ladder. Okay, now the 4th final chapter for me is institutional participation. Andreas Kubidus mentioned Prodi, everything but the institutions, which he then qualified. But what we are advocating here is to move away from the existing enlargement doctrine, which is all or nothing. You're either out or you're in everything, and move much more plausibly for the future, given where we are now, to a progressive system of participation step by step in each of the institutions, depending upon the problems, which may be more or less serious in each of the case. What we've discovered in publishing this work is that it is ringing bells in the Balkans. And in fact, we are now establishing a network relationship with the Balkan civil society of the Balkan states, because they have reached basically the same conclusion as ourselves, namely back off this binary in or out job and focus on what partial progressive elements of institutional participation can become possible. I mean, for the council, it's the most difficult one. Go and have a seat at the table with a veto card for as long as I can see. but there can be policy dialogue with the council. You can't have more commissioners. The idea is to reduce the number of commissioners, but you could have staff eligibility. Parliament is much more interesting because you could envisage observer membership and even elected members of the European Parliament if the political conditionality is good. And so on to the consultative bodies and the agencies, which is the easiest category. So the overarching idea here is instead of getting stuck in this enlargement impasse like the Balkans, or stuck in the negation of membership perspective in your case, let us all focus on an overarching but revised concept of how your countries can progressively accede to the full rights and benefits of membership of the European Union, conditional in the ways that I mentioned, before classic accession with full membership of all of the institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this presentation. And I just directly hand over to Tinatin for the second part.
Yes, many thanks, Stefan. I'm very happy to be here today and to see more cooperation between GIP and CEPS. So as Michael said, I'm going to go more into the details of the basically ratings. Just to explain where Georgia stands today in comparison with the two DCFTA states and also in comparison with the Balkan and candidate countries. Now, to start with generally, right? So in general, we can basically cluster the ratings. Basically, we considered a lot of ratings, a lot of different scores in different areas in the study, but we can cluster them around political dimension and economic dimension. In both directions, well, Georgia, we all know that Georgia had quite a front-runner status across the EIP states for many years. And in our study, we can see that this is actually happening still when it comes to the comparison among the DCFTA states in both political dimension as well as the economic dimension. Georgia still basically scores high and actually the best and scores higher than Ukraine and Moldova. Now, very briefly to guide our audience, why is this the case? That first of all, the differences, the gap between the DCFTA states are not really large. So they're more or less mapped close to each other. But in political dimension, Georgia, political and legal aspects, Georgia mainly owes to its anti-corruption reforms and tackling corruption very well. So this is the main source of the scoring highly in Georgia in this area. And in the economic area, the main reason why Georgia scores the higher is the macroeconomic performance, which we based solely on the GDP per capita and the trade policy. Now, let me explain here a few things. Well, with the corruption, I think we can all witness this corruption, tackling corruption was quite successful in Georgia. With economic direction, so the trade policy is here measured by the trade liberalization and by all the efforts that the country took to simplify the procedures, right? So to procedures to trade, all the procedures at the customs. So these are the areas which I think all witness that Georgia did quite successfully. So what happened to trade in reality and whether trade is really boosted the most with Georgia, this is completely another question. And actually this is not exactly the same. We can discuss this later on during the Q&A session. I'm just flagging that assessing trade policy doesn't mean in trade policy Georgia did a good efforts, and that's what we see in the ratings. Now, we saw the country with 2024. So if we compare Georgia to the candidate countries and actually front runners among the candidate countries, which are, according to our study, Montenegro and Serbia, then we see really considerable gaps in both directions, in political direction and in economic direction. So with political areas, political and legal aspects, as I've already told you, Georgia scores really high in corruption. If we look at the TI, Transparency International, and corruption accession perception index, Georgia scores actually ahead of the Balkan states, ahead of all the countries in the sample, but still taking into account the other flaws in Georgia's legal system, politicized justice, well, human rights, all the other things, democracies and ups and downs in the current political tensions. Obviously, there is a gap. The largest gap still comes in political areas between Georgia and the front-runner Balkan countries. In economic direction, again, Georgia scores actually higher than the Balkan states in trade policy for the reasons I've already mentioned. So simplifying all the trade procedures, really making a good progress on customs and so on. But the gap is really, really high on macroeconomic performance. And here, CEPS team, I think, did a very good job by comparing the macroeconomic performance with the EU member states, the 3 newest EU member states, Bulgaria, Romania, and Croatia, because it gives us a very good indicator how far are the DCFTA states and how far is actually Georgia. So I don't want to go much into the numbers. I will just maybe draw a comparison that today the Bulgaria, which is basically the poorest, right, in the EU, still has the GDP per capita nearly twice as high as Georgia. I think this should be a good in macroeconomic performance. Even though Georgia is better than its DCFTA partners, there is a considerable gap with the front-runner European Union. So this is something to be taken into account. Now, the other things that I wanted to very briefly highlight, well, many thanks, Stefan, for mentioning the fundamental research. I mean, CEPS team really tried its best to actually go into depth and really do the ratings and assessment per sectors. So I don't really want to overlook these findings at the sectoral level, but I will do it very, very briefly. So basically, if we go sector by sector, then I just wanted to flag the sectors in which Georgia has done remarkable progress and in which there is progress a bit low or slow. So the remarkable progress we can see in customs, in public procurement, and the 2 sectors that really deserve attention, these are digital and cyber. Now, digital is basically covered by the association agreement and the DCFTA parts of it. So in the digital sector, Georgia is remarkable that went beyond its commitment under the agreement and approximated really new EU legislation on e-commerce, digital signatures, well, even data privacy. And this is something that Georgia's done well, and this is something that could be potentially a very good starting point for extending a sectoral cooperation. Now, with the cyber, Georgia has really remarkable scores globally as well as in the EU. So across the European continent, Georgia scores the 9th the best in cyber. This is something really remarkable. And also, this is the area which is actually not covered by the association agreement, neither DCFTA. So there is no single word about cyber. Obviously, for quite understandable reasons, because when the AA's association agreements were negotiated back then, there was no cyber legislation at the EU level. There is no cyber policy of the EU, right? So this is why this is basically a gap here. So there is a question how we address this gap as well. And the other areas where the progress was relatively low,
around.
sure, or slow, I will very briefly, I will very briefly say that. So this is energy, environment, employment, social. So basically gender issues. So if we could just, look at these more general, from a general perspective, these are the social and sustainable areas in which Georgia has rather slow progress, but there is a progress in this. So this is also to take into account. So just very briefly, maybe to summarize, is that Georgia still scores better than the DCFTA states, but there is a considerable gap in the Balkan states. And I think our report gives a very good background, which should be the sectors for further cooperation, which are the sectors in which there is a lack of cooperation, as I said, sustainable and social areas. Yeah, and I will stop here and we'll be very happy to reply to the questions later on.
Thank you, Tinatin, and thank you both for this presentation. I think it's really very useful, and I think also to raise this point of socioeconomic development in the country. I think this is a major issue for Georgia. Also, if you think about cohesion and support also for reforms in the society. So I think despite all these successes, yeah, I think that's a major issue for the country. So I would directly hand over to the comments by Georgian representatives. We have political side and as I also mentioned, and also, let's say, think tank side. And let's start in the order we have here in the program with Maka Pocherishvili, who, as I said, is member of parliament and chair of the Committee on European Integration. So we have 10 minutes maximum, and just one technical issue. Please write your questions in the Q&A and raise also your hands for later for the discussion. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. First of all, my sincere thanks to Georgian Institute of Politics and personally to Korika Kachia for having me today as a speaker. And well, this is very important discussion we are having today. We have exchanged views in many occasions with Mr. Andreas Kobilius on what we can do in order to create new opportunities to reinforce actual partnership between the European Union and Eastern partners, and how to further facilitate the integration of those countries that are willing to do so. And I'm particularly pleased that today we have this opportunity to discuss in this format building a new momentum for European integration of associated trio, and compare on how the Balkan and Eastern partners fared in their progress alignment of the EU laws and norms. Well, I will take this opportunity and thank Andrews for his efforts and for sharing his thoughts today. And again, my thanks to Michael Emerson and Tina for their kind of very, very important work, and for this study, which is great ground for our future, you know, thinkings and good food for thought. This study is very good illustration of the need for new opportunities for the Eastern Partnerships countries. Today's discussion is very important and needed, and I would welcome if civil society in Georgia and think tanks pay even more attention to the debates, which will allow us to share views and thoughts with wider community on Georgia's most pressing issue, which is EU integration process. And this is timely as well because we are, we have Eastern Partnership Summit hopefully by the end of the year. And it is very important that we take stock of what has been done, what has been achieved, and where we stand and what can we do in future. And it is very important for European Union and for the Eastern partner countries to be ready for this summit and to look what we are expecting from this summit. For that, this kind of observation and discussions are crucial to take a look and to look also in future what we expect. This study gives us a comparative picture that Balkan and associated trio are increasingly comparable in their alignment on the EU acquis. The associated countries does not simply lag behind on the EU integration path compared to the Balkan countries, but in most cases precede them. And Tina explained quite well where these comparisons are quite, impressive. There are many aspects that unite us, but the instruments and tools for European integration are different. And I will try to look at this study from Georgia's perspective and the inspiration, which will probably be important while taking into consideration recommendations from study and what we discussed. Today, Georgia, along with Ukraine and Moldova, is EU associated country. The prospect and opportunity of the association agreement was brought to us in 2009 by the launching of the Eastern Partnership Initiative. However, clear perspective of joining the European Union is still missing. In 2014, we signed the study reveals of all neighboring countries as well as compared to candidate states, Georgia is a front runner and leader in the region on the path toward the European Union due to its successful implementation of the association agreement. If we look at it from the perspective perspective, the EU integration has been the main driving force from the very first days of our independence, supported by more than 80% of the population. Association agreement together with DCFTAs played a crucial role in this direction, created a solid foundation for political association and deep economic integration with the European Union. Another big achievement was visa liberalization on our EU integration path. And now, 10 years after the signature of association agreement, Georgia plans to apply for the EU membership in 2024. Well, I believe that this is logical step we should take if we have clear EU integration aspiration on our European integration path. Well, given the EU's current stance on the enlargement, this statement may sound too ambitious today, but it should not raise fears in advance whether EU will be ready in 2024 to respond positively to Georgia's application, but we have to look at the possibilities, how we can advance meanwhile, and what can we do to get that positive answer up to 2024. Well, discussions of future of the European Union was mentioned, which is progress today. And I think it would be also fair if those countries who see their future with or within the European Union take part in these debates as well. It would be very important. And today, when we examine different ways to adapt the current realities, create new opportunities, I think it is necessary to underline that the Article 49 of the EU integration, European Union Treaty is valid, and the EU enlargement will be possible in accordance with the existing criteria. And speaking again, once again, from Georgia's example, the presence of a specific perspective and goal on the European integration path has always played an important role in our reforms agenda, and such further goal is the EU membership. And how we will achieve this goal, of course, should be the subject of discussion with the European Union, and that's what our application on 2024 is for. The CEPS study offers many interesting ideas, which I think is very important if we can, and if they can be used to facilitate and accelerate the EU integration process. There are, of course, some risks involved in some of the ideas, not to be seen as alternatives of EU membership, or whether they will appropriate achieve the ultimate goal, or whether they will create additional barriers. But however, we must also acknowledge that the current difficult reality, where we both, EU and the Eastern Partnership countries, are facing multidimensional challenges, there is a real need for innovative approaches in our integration agenda in short-term perspective. The Eastern Partnership Summit is approaching, and it is vital that it delivers important message to associated countries. We need a new long-term vision for EU integration, such as more structured political dialogue with the EU to ensure that both EU and EU's political agenda are in line with our and the EU's political agenda are in line with each other. Stronger and more effective mechanisms to better and faster implement association agreements. We need effective mechanisms for full access to EU single market, more support and to sectoral integration, which has been mentioned here as well, and to democratic reforms as well. Of course, when we think about membership perspectives and status of candidate countries, we should look at the Balkan region example and analyze side effect of delayed European integration process and take into account the experience of associated partners in the EU integration as well. So this is why this discussion is very important for us. And while Georgia plans to take a concrete step towards the EU integration in 2024 and raise the issue of EU membership in the European agenda, we should do our best to all possible means to make political efficient attitude for this comprehensive, which is, I think, very, very much useful for us. And I think it really gives good look and basis to think about defining steps for us and for associated countries. And I think this is also, Andrews mentioned that it is important to start discussions in different capitals of European Union and in Eastern Partnership countries as well. I myself, as the chair of the European Integration Committee, I would love to have this discussion in the European Integration Committee of the Georgian Parliament with participation of different political forces, as now we have all political parties represented in the Georgian Parliament. I think it would be good to have this kind of discussions, to have more inclusive process and to have more inclusive sharing ideas, which is related to the most important subject of Georgia's future, which is European integration. So I would like to extend my invitation to our committee to have this discussion in the European Integration Committee and continue discussion on these very, very important things here, and also in many other capitals as well, which is also vital ahead of the Eastern Partnership Summit. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for these comments. I think, yes, Georgia is definitely ahead, but I think the key issue stays strengthening institutions and also the sustainability of the reform process. But yeah, I think it was very good also to have your comments. So I would hand over now to Salome Shapak-Hitze, who is representing the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much. Once again, greetings also from my side, from Tbilisi, and definitely thanks the Georgian Institute of Politics and the Center for European Policy Studies, and also for very interesting contributions and presentations. And in fact, we follow very, very closely publications of CEPS, especially of comparative analysis between the Western Balkans and Eastern Partnership countries. And we in many agencies of Georgia, but especially at the NFA, are always in search of new ideas as we are in the thinking how to advance the integration process with the EU. And these reports, while they are very informative, they're also very helpful, and for quite a number of reasons, and let me outline just a few. One, these reports have proved what we knew already, that these two regions, that are Western Balkans and Eastern European associated partners, are comparable, having in mind similar antecedent conditions such as communism, therefore similar legacies, European aspirations, strategic goals, conflicts, as well as a few big players involved and others. And two, results of the for political, legal, and economic policy areas, whereas in some spheres, of course, the Balkans are ahead, and in others, associated partners. And we share the findings of CEPS that based on comparability of these two regions, and indeed, if this is the case, we believe that EU policies to both regions should be comparable too, which means that associated partners, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, should also have a special status like the Western Balkans, at least of a potential candidate. And also when it comes to security policy, EU is well aware of the importance of the Western Balkans for its own peace and stability, and acknowledges the direct link to our broader Black Sea region, and we hope it will be better acknowledged, realized, and we see this trend, in fact, lately, that peace and stability of Europe is not possible without peace and stability across the Black Sea. The reports are also a very good tool to identify areas where we could do more to advance the integration process. And we definitely share the notion that the associated states, in effect, opened all chapters in one go back in 2014 and took the commitments going beyond the opening the benchmarks for the pre-accession process, exactly because, as highlighted in the report, our association agreements are more comprehensive, detailed, and legally precise, therefore apparently more advanced and demanding than stabilization association agreements. And this notion allows us de facto to be on the same track as the Western Balkans. With the to officially make an EU application in 2024, we see it in fact as a motivation and as a possibility to better coordinate our domestic reforms, because in this process from our side, the key would be, of course, effective implementation of association agreement, which is actually a basis for our domestic reform agenda, as well as realization of its full potential. And in this context, we see the gradual integration into the EU single market as our next major benchmark. Also, you know that Georgia does not have a land border with the EU, and without a land border with the EU, once again, strengthening connectivity, especially across the Black Sea, is vital for us. And besides, it will politically and physically cut the distance between Georgia and the EU. So many ideas expressed in the report also echo our thinking. As mentioned, an approach of selective and gradual integration in sectors could be an effective way to achieve best possible convergence of our sectorial policy with the EU, being part of unions, be it digital, energy, transport, being part of EU agencies and programs, addressing hybrid threats, being part of PESCO, having similar instruments of assistance as Balkans, using the principles of conditionality, and not only. And it was also mentioned here, and thank you very much for that, that one of the steps in this direction could be also the establishment of the trio association format, with 3 Eastern European associated partners, which is based on 3 pillars actually. One pillar is more coordination among each other, among Georgia, Ukraine, Moldova. Second is more coordination of us as a group with the European Union across different sectors of working on the Eastern Partnership, and the summit is approaching in December, and Marka has mentioned that as well. And we're already starting working on identifying the concrete directions and concrete themes for several directions where we could do and where we could do more, where we could work together as with each other, but also as a group together with the EU. But as in a case where it is very ownership with the EU, we really do hope that EU will use this new momentum and will manage to elaborate the new strategic long-term vision towards the region, encouraging not only for the associated trio, not only for us, but it will be definitely encouraging for the other 3 Eastern partners as well. And in the end, on the Conference of Europe, we know that the broad process of discussions on the future of Europe has been launched, and we definitely hope that our region will be not only discussed in this process, but that we in the Eastern Europe will be able to actively participate in these discussions. So maybe I will stop here, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for also being in time. I think really important also to mention Black Sea region, and that the EU also needs to rethink maybe, or to upgrade its policy towards the whole region. There are a lot of changes going on. Yeah, so I just hand over to Vano from the Open Society Georgia Foundation for the final remarks, and then we go into the questions. We will have not so much time for questions and answers, but still there is some time, please.
Extend my appreciation to the GIP for this very timely event and organize on these topics, which really makes me very happy being one of the proponents of Georgia's European integration. Listening all these discussions, I would like to roll out 6 or actually 8 points here which are supporting those ideas and those content of this research that was carried out by CEPS. I think that giving the membership perspective to Georgia is crucially important, and not only to Georgia, but also those two other countries, Ukraine and Moldova, who are performing pretty well compared to others with the partnership. And that is necessary because of demonstrating that EU is not having the non-discriminatory policy. Actually saying that Article 42 is equally applicable to those countries who are performing sometimes, as it was mentioned here, better than the Western Balkan states. And stating that the treaty is still alive and it's still applicable, and it's not a stillborn clause, actually. My second point would be about the membership between the membership perspective and the candidate status. And I think that this is pretty much, we all are aware here in the country that giving the membership perspective does not necessarily mean immediate candidate status, and we have to go a long way in order to grab that status, and at the end of the day to join the European Union. I think that giving this perspective would give fresh impetus to the Georgia-EU relations, as well as Georgia-Ukraine and Georgia-Moldova relations. This is first. And the second, it would be a very good tool in the hands of the European Union to apply more conditionality and stricter conditionality. This will be also very important tool for us, for the civil society organizations, for the think tanks, watchdogs, in order to push for more comprehensive and very effective and efficient reforms. There is also another issue here, and I would like to stress on the European Parliament's statements, which are every time stressing to give the membership perspective to those three countries. And this is not just a statement of one political group from the European Parliament, but that there are several of them who are supporting this idea. And we all are aware that the European Parliament is the institution which is representing the people of the European Union. My fourth point would be about the general kind of argument that people, actually the population of the EU member states, are against extending the membership or extending the bloc even to the east or to the south. And I think that this is not any longer true, because according to the latest opinion poll survey, which was carried out by New Europe, think tank of Ukraine, we also that 47% of German population is actually in favor of membership of Ukraine to the European Union. I cannot say the same about Georgia and Moldova, because that particular study was just focusing on Ukraine. My first point, believe in the European project, and this is necessary, and this is important for the citizens of the European Union, as well as the citizens and for people who are living here in the eastern neighborhood, that this idea, this European project, is still alive, and this as a kind of new optimism that would be very important, crucial drive for us, for the people. And I have to also mention that the support, which was also referred here several times here in the population, is very high, and this is not kind of support where the people are just calculating the benefits just of the DCFTA and AA. Of course, they care about those benefits, but at the same time, they equally or even more care about the European values and democratic reforms that has to be carried out in the or is being carried out in the country. My sixth point would be about why it's important to give the membership perspective, because that would be very, very important and good tool in the hands of us, in the hands of the pro-European forces here in the country, to use against those who are anti-Europeans and who are nationalistic and who are very much outspoken about the negative sides and negative effect of Europeanization of the country. And two issues. One is about, again, giving the membership perspective to Georgia or to Moldova and Ukraine. At the same time, would be very important to strengthen the resilience. And I think that that's clear signal, and that would be the best tool to strengthen the resilience of these countries, which are every time mentioned in each and every document of the European Union. And last but not least, as it was also mentioned here, and it is also in the recommendations of the CEPS, I think that extending the single market to those countries, to Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine, is very important and very useful from that economical point of view, because it would be kind of adding up 50 million people to the consumers, to the single market of Europe. So this is like overall those 8 points that I wanted to share with you. And I have again to stress that almost all the civil society organizations, all the think tanks here are very much backing this statement, which is enshrined in our constitution about Georgia's EU membership. And they are also backing this choice, the foreign policy choice of Georgia, saying that by 2024, Georgia will apply for EU membership. So let me stop here, and I would be happy to answer any questions that there will be. Thank you.
Thank you for these points, and also to underline support of think tank community and civil society. I think that's also important. So you still can ask questions. I don't know if we managed 2 rounds. Let's see, we have 20 minutes left. I just read out 4 questions. 2 have been already answered by Tinatin, so you can read the answers, and I would not read out these questions again. So let's take these 4 questions. I think they are mainly to the CEPS researchers. So I would give you then the word, but let's first read. So the first question is from Irakli Sirbiladze. Should Georgia worry at all about application rejection based on the geographic argument, or Georgia is safe because association agreement already considers Georgia as an Eastern European country? That would be the first question. Second question is from Bezina Lebanitze. The speakers mentioned sectoral integration. 2 questions in this regard. First question is, do you consider EU-wide labor mobility deal for Georgian workers realistic? So the important topic of labor mobility. Second is, do you think Georgia Eastern Partnership countries could get limited access to intra-EU funds, such as structural funds without EU membership? So the money question is very important. And the third question is, Georgia, in this context, Georgia also has a free trade agreement and strong ties to China in areas of trade and investment. Do you think Georgia's relations with China can cause tensions in EU-Georgia relations in the future? So maybe the growing impact of China in the region. So we have 2 more questions to any speaker. These are, in the report, it is talk on a restructuring of enlargement and neighborhood policy along the following lines. How realistic do you think is this perspective? And so this was from Nino Samkharadze and from Salome Kandelaki. From the perspective of the state, what role could the non-governmental organizations and think tanks play in strengthening the European aspiration of Georgia? And what kind of cooperation is seen as the most effective on one between the non-governmental and the governmental sectors? Maybe also to Vano this question. So maybe I give to Michael, I hand over, and you take the questions you think which are the most relevant for you. And Tinatin, you can also add something there. Michael, did you get all the questions?
Who, me?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
because I think most of the questions are to the report and to the report. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, some good questions there. The first one actually, it really links to the most fundamental worry about application rejection based on the geographic argument. Georgia is running a risk of making a formal application that polite representatives of the European Union would say is premature. Okay, you've stated this ground, I stated it's going to do. The geographic argument, I don't think will be fundamental. It might be used as a pretext, but it's not fundamental. What is fundamental is if Georgia is going to go ahead, you've got 3 years between now and then. You have to get to the top of the class impressively and fast to become credible. And then secondly, in my personal opinion, and I hadn't thought about this until the question was posed, but the idea of progressive, partial, conditional, step-by-step institutional integration could fit and help make the 2024 application not a simple, blunt, in accordance with Article X, hereby is our application, but rather to fashion an application that would take into account the interesting possibilities for progressive institutional integration. So 3 years is a long time in politics, and the debate may well move on before then. But in the meantime, that would be my reply to that one. I got replies to the other ones, but maybe I should leave the floor to others. Unless.
Okay, Michael. Tina, you want?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on Bizina's question,
Okay, you go ahead.
First of all, is it realistic? I would say it is going to be realistic when Georgian domestic wage levels get much higher in relation to even low European standards, I mean Bulgarian or Croatian standards. Otherwise, there's going to be a risk of excessive brain drain. Now, on the structural funds question, well, structural funds is a term of art that has a legal meaning. It is within EU membership, but aid you get under the DCFTA and pre-accession funding that the Balkans get, all of this is not structural funds. But the question is whether structural type funds could build up conditionally on good performance. There, I would say, don't go for the formalistic question. We want structural funds with capital S, capital F, but go for progressive build-up of it. And on the China question, I would say at this stage, no, it is not something that is going to, I mean, within the EU itself, economic relations with China and the relative importance is a contested and very live issue right now. So as and when Georgia might become a member of the single market and the customs union, then of course, if the EU did not have a free trade agreement with China, that would have to go. That is so far down the horizon that is not a practical issue as of now. And then one other, the next question from Nino Samanadze, how realistic do you think this perspective of restructuring enlargement neighborhood policies is? Well, this is a classic question. Everything is unrealistic until political leaders change their minds. And from time to time, political leaders do change their minds. And so 3 years, I mean, as I already hinted, in the Balkan case, this issue is becoming live and quite vivid. And civil society representatives in the Balkans are beginning to argue in favor of this restructuring of the enlargement concept. So don't do nothing because the official institutions don't say yes today.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. I think I take this this question about the perspective from the perspective of the state. What role could the non-governmental organizations and think tanks play in strengthening EU aspiration, and also what kind of cooperation is seen as the most effective between non-governmental and governmental sector? I would ask Vano to ask this question, and maybe also Maka from the parliament, also from the state perspective, where do you see your non-governmental and governmental sector? Maybe Vano, you start, and then I would ask Maka.
Well, I think that one of the crucial and one of the offers that we have been making to executive as well as legislative branches is actually to act like a candidate state country, and here I mean to do the screening or preemptive screening procedure. That would be something that would help us a lot in process of accelerating our integration process. And as a sample, we actually did several civil society organizations already did the assessment, taking the most comprehensive and most problematic, if I may say so, the chapter 23, which covers the human rights and judiciary, etc., and we assessed the current situation. So I think that in that regard, that would be the help that and support that civil society organizations can provide to the state in this process of assessing or self-assessing where we are standing now and what are the steps we have to make in order to actually to get closer to the European Union. I also have to mention that several years ago, the discussion about the future steps of Georgia's EU integration, or what's next, this question which has been floating every time, that was a question that was very boldly raised up by the several think tanks, which was backed by my organization, by Open Society Foundation. And I think that this kind of discussions, and I think that this kind of assessment process would definitely help us in order to have this cooperative mood and in order to get closer to the European Union.
Maybe you could, from the parliament side, also answer to this question. Thank you.
Very much. That's actually a crucial question, and our cooperation is very important because without civil society and without their support, I think that will be difficult to achieve the goals we want to achieve, because it is very important to have the support from civil society on this very, very important issue. From Parliament's perspective, we are quite open, very open, and ready to cooperate as much as we can with all the organizations representing civil society here. And I think we have some good examples of cooperation as well, but we should look how we can enhance in the perspective of 2024 and application for EU membership, because that is, I think, crucial to have to work together and to show that unity, which your statement from civil society is very good example that we are very much in line with our aspirations with the European Union to European Union. So it is very important that we show our unity on this path. So, well, what can I say? It's crucial, it's important, and here it is open. That is actually good possibility in the Parliament, because Parliament really gives that opportunity to have that very close cooperation with civil society representatives and to listen to them and to have their voice heard here. So I'm ready from my perspective to continue this cooperation and even expand it further.
Thank you very much. I see one blue hand, I don't know, from Ani Muradashvili, if this is because it's from the beginning there, if this is a real blue hand, pleasure can come in, just open the video and speak. So do we want to ask a question? Or maybe it's also by accident. Maybe you just say shortly if you want to ask a question or not. If not, then I would take this last question here, which I think is also very good to ask. And maybe for Tina-Teen, it could be a question, but Michael can also answer to it. So how would the EU benefit from these countries joining the Union? theoretically speaking, these benefits may have a strategic nature or an economic or humanitarian sense. So far, in none of these countries are there any reliable arguments separately for Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova. When considered together, these countries also lack such arguments, although the chance of their becoming interesting for the EU are greater when considering with one prospective region. So it's about the benefits. Maybe Tina, you can answer to this.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and maybe then Michael will complement. I mean, obviously, in economic terms, I mean, there is no big benefits for the EU. We should be very realistic, look at the figures, and overall, I mean, the trade with Georgia or Moldova, well, Ukraine is a larger market, is a very, very, very minor, right? Below 1% for the European Union. So economic benefits are not great. These are small markets. With the strategic importance, obviously, this is strategic region. These are the small countries, but this is a battlefield of all these bigger players in the world. So I think if the EU is committed by its own treaty to commit itself to building the prosperous relationship in its immediate neighborhood, well, this is again commitment by its own treaty, then EU should play a very commit itself to the good neighborly relations and be a strategic partner of Georgia and the other eastern neighbors. So I think it's a rather straightforward. The benefits here again is what happens in the region across the EU's border usually quite immediately affects what happens to the EU itself, right? And also, Stefan, if I could go ahead and also take another question, which was later on added, it was on economic recovery from the pandemic. I will very briefly refer to it because I think this is an important question, whether the worsening economic situation during the pandemic could even increase the gap in macroeconomic performance of Georgia and eastern neighbors and with the EU. Indeed, the gap is there. And indeed, when the gap widens, it's really worrisome because then it becomes harder, right, to come closer to the single market, to the union. However, this is not the question we should ask today. The question we should ask today is what are the efforts on how we are going to recover from this crisis, how we are going to recover from this pandemic. And the focus should be exactly on the sustainable recovery, where Georgia actually made some good progress. I already mentioned digital, I already mentioned cyber, and there are the other areas which highlight that there should be more progress in this direction. In green, in the environment, where Ukraine has done actually more, showed more interest than Georgia did, for instance, by opening the dialogue about a Green Deal, launching the dialogue about a Green Deal with the EU. So the question to be asked, how we recover sustainably from this situation. And I will stop here as we are running out of time, and I will hand over to Michael.
Sorry. Michael, you want to add something, or? Michael?
Well, on this last question, I mean, it is a very important one. To my mind, the benefits from the EU are of strategic nature. They're not economic, it's too small. Humanitarian, well, that's a global value. It is strategic in two senses. One, it is for the European Union to be consistent in application of its values in favor of democracy in Europe, inscribed in the treaties. So consistency over our values is argument number one, strategic argument number one. Strategic argument number two is the indirect impact on Russia and relations with Russia. Here, the debate actually goes in two different directions, depending upon who you're listening to. But the positive argument in favor of the value of enlargement for Georgia and the other countries is that this would be happening in a manner in which these countries would be admirable democracies and economies, and would be serving as an admirable example for the rest of Eastern Europe, which is in a rather unfortunate condition. So, positive example effect. There are those people who turn the argument completely around, saying for Ukraine in particular and Georgia, well, all three of them, to become good members of the European Union would make the Russian bear even more angry and unpredictable and dangerous. So you know what the argument is. Personally speaking, I don't know about Andreas and Tina. Well, I think I know what they think. I don't buy that second argument. I think the first argument is the one to go on, and in particular for Ukraine as the biggest and most sensitive case in relation to Russia. For Ukraine to become a normal European country in the best sense of the word, that has resonance, means something to the Russian people. It may have to wait a long time for post-Putin Russia to arrive and all that, but that's the position to stick on for the time being. Thank you. Stefan, you have views on this too, don't you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think I will hand over for the final word to Corneli, just to conclude or to finalize. I really want to thank CEPS, the two speakers of CEPS for this presentation and this great study. And I want to thank also the other speakers for commenting on this, and also for MP Kubilius for joining this event. It was really great pleasure, and I think it's very, very good to have this focus also with this bigger study on the particular countries, and in this case on Georgia. So maybe Corneli, for you, the final words.
Thank you, Stefan. I think I agree with you that it is very important to have discussion on these matters related to the region, to Georgia. And as I said many times previously, that what Georgia and some other EP countries actually missing is that we want to be involved in this pan-European discussion about future of Europe. And sometimes it's not because of pandemic, it was before the pandemic also problematic, because it's not only geography, but some other political, issues are also a little bit, how to say, obstacle for this. So, and this kind of discussion, I think, is very important to have a self-assessment for Georgian civil society, government, and etc. And also it gives us, a lot of food for thought for future and how Georgia's Europeanization should be dealt with. And I think this is, the very important event, and I hope we will have some other occasion also to host this or some related issues very soon. Thank you very much to everybody, all speakers and also attendees, and hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.